Imagine an organization which is recruiting for a job. You're expected to work 7 days a week, earn less than the average person. And every year they're going to fire between 10 and 20% of you. And most of you need to give your life savings just to be considered for that opportunity. Would you take that job? Because that's the job description of an entrepreneur. I believe far too many people go into this blind, chasing a dream, armed with not very much other than a motivational meme. But it doesn't have to be like that. I've spent 20 years chasing this dream myself, and 7 years teaching other people how to do it as well. I believe with a simple framework, we can remove a lot of these errors, we can remove a lot of the failures before people risk too much. But how did I get here? Well, like many aspiring engineers, I was a child of Lego. I loved problem solving, I loved dismantling things, taking things apart, working out how everything would function. And when I was 18, I was even lucky enough to build my own car. But where my story deviates from the sort of engineer origin story of Norm is that apparently I would go around school, and when my teachers would ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up, I would tell them I wanted to be a dictator. And so, perhaps not the greatest of career choices, and so an entrepreneur seems like an easy second choice. But I came to this university and studied manufacturing and design, and I got a part-time job while I was a student with a local company, building, designing, and making business plans for entrepreneurs. They would come to us with their vision, and we would put the proposal together. We would do all the market research, we would work out what funding they needed, and so on. The proposals were great. Okay? We raised a lot of money for our clients, but these businesses were terrible. Okay? None of them would last. None of them would stay very long. And thinking back at it, it doesn't really, it seems obvious. Why would you farm out the most important evidence-gathering activity to some 20-year-old with no experience and who's only he's being paid to tell you just the good things? But I had been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, and while a student, I launched my first business, running coaches from the quiet town of Bristol to the much more grittier and exciting nightlife of Bristol down the road. Business was great. Students loved it, the Students' Union loved it, and the clubs in Bristol would give ticket holders free drinks, free entry. It was a great business. We were moving between 50 and 500 students a night. But there was one small problem with this business. I hated drunk people, okay? And I didn't particularly like clubbing either, okay? I'm the quiet sort of computer game playing history nerd. This was not my scene. But I was addicted to solving the problem, and I could do it. But the impact it was having on me was not what I wanted. It wasn't matching my ambitions and values. I graduated university, and after many more war stories, I was lucky enough to be able to recruit and support a small team. And together, we invented lots of things, some of them very serious and ambitious, like trying to improve the fuel economy of commercial vehicles, while others were rather silly. We were renting an office in a Sea Cadet meeting hall, and I think that had a sort of impact on our thought process. I got an invite one day to a friend's pirate-themed fancy dress canoe ride. And without hesitation, we sprung into action and built a one-person electric galleon for just the job. It took me 5 miles down the River Dart, and we made quite a scene arriving in this little village on their jetty. But 7 years ago, I had an opportunity to teach. One of my lecturers was leaving, and I was contacted saying, did I want to take his place and teach entrepreneurship and innovation to engineers here at Bath. I knew all the theory he taught me. I'd spent years reading all of the books. I'd spent years trying to put it all into practice. It seemed quite easy. What could possibly go wrong? But as I started, it became clear that the world of entrepreneurship education is completely fragmented. It's a disjointed theories mixed with half-truths, mixed with rich, quick gurus, and wisdom from investors that's there to make them rich, not necessarily you. When the students start asking you questions and you can't put all the pieces together, it's a real challenge. And I found three main problems with entrepreneurship education. The first one is that it cannot be boiled down to a catchphrase. If you ask 100 successful people what made them successful, you'll get every cliche that there is. But there is very little value in what the successful, lucky outlier did. The real value is what in all the majority did that caused them to fail. If we could look for the trends in the failures, it's much more worthy than what the individuals did to succeed. Number two, entrepreneurship is not a checklist. It's not a list of boxes that you can tick off. Creating something which has long-term sustainable value is not the same as business creation. And lastly, the process everyone is taught is that of building and then testing. But if you're an entrepreneur, they add the caveat of just do it faster. This might work reasonably well in software. It's a terrible idea in hardware development, and it's even worse in commercial ventures. It's very hard for someone to build a hotel, see if anyone turned up, and then dismantle it and build it somewhere else if it didn't work. So as a teacher, I saw my role as trying to simplify a complex problem. Could I get all these disjointed pieces of the jigsaw to come together to fit into one sort of simple to understand whole? And I think I've managed it. I'm a visual thinker. I like to use pictures and images as we explain things. And the image that struck in my mind is that of a castle. Imagine in your head a castle within the center, in the great keep, is a treasure. That treasure is your entrepreneurial success. That is what we're all trying to uncover. That's what we're all trying to find. And you as entrepreneurs, as innovators, are on a quest to uncover that treasure and capture the castle. But the treasure is guarded by 8 towers. Problem: what pain are you alleviating? What job are you fulfilling? Purpose: that's our why, our aims, ambitions, our values. Vision: the fun, creative bit, designing the future. That's the bit that engineers in particular get very excited about. Hypothesis: what key insights or assumptions does everything else hang on? That if they don't work, nothing else is going to. Evidence: what are we seeing that gives us confidence that everything we've done up to this point is making sense? Proposal: how much money do we need? How much time? Are there legal constraints and so forth? Then the delivery: do we have the right people? Do we have the right resources? And then finally, the impact. Is our vision actually achieving the ambitions we set for ourselves? Because if it's not, we've been solving the wrong problem this whole time. All 8 of the towers need to be held at the same time. I like the castle analogy because entrepreneurship is like a battle. Things are constantly changing, things are constantly moving. New players are entering, old players are leaving. The situation is dynamic. You have to hold all the castles, all the towers at once in order to get into the center. Now, this isn't a linear process you can jump around, and you can start anywhere. Personally, I like starting with the hypothesis. Is there something fundamental in this industry or this activity? And can I find the evidence for or against it? And then I would move back to problem and down to vision. So this is the model in its kind of simple kind of textbook format, I guess. There's a lot to it. There's more layers that I haven't shown here. But in its simple form, the solution is that epicenter between viable, desirable, and feasible. But I want to end on a story that I think will try and kind of bring this into reality. This is a self-driving autonomous robot that we've been developing for fruit farms. Fruit farms in the UK and around the world are in crisis. There isn't enough pickers to harvest the crop, and crops are going to waste. It's not a new problem, it's been around for a while, and entrepreneurs all around the world responded to the call, and startups sprung up. Those startups can be clustered into two camps. They're tackling two different hypotheses. Hypothesis one is that the robots can replace the humans and pick the fruit for them. We don't need people anymore. Right? Hypothesis number two is that the robots will help the humans be more efficient. We'll let the humans do what humans do best, which is the picking of the fruit, and we'll have the robots do the boring, mundane task of moving the fruit back to where it needs to be stored. I think this is where most entrepreneurs and startups have stopped their thinking. They've been taught the classic build and test model. They have their vision, a robot that picks fruit or a robot that moves fruit, and they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make these visions into reality. Now we're coming into this game late. We can see what people are trying to do, we can look at the assumptions, and we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars. Can we flip the model? Okay? In the Innovation Castle, I'm looking for evidence before I get to delivery. Can I test and build rather than build and test? So we went along to a large farm. These guys are experts in it. This is sort of £100 million a year farm. They do every type of soft fruit. And I'm there being the good engineer. I'm measuring heights of things. I'm measuring widths of things, distances between things, the condition of the terrain. Okay, building a robot that's going to work in this environment is very hard. And while I'm there measuring everything and talking to the various people, a group of Hungarian fruit pickers arrived to start their shift. Immediately, it is obvious to me that hypothesis one does not work. These guys are so quick, they're so good, they're so effective at doing this job that I think it's going to be at least 20 years before a robot can do anything similar. Okay? So that's half the industry of startups in trouble. And it makes me start to panic because we're thinking, gosh, if those half people are doing it wrong, what about the other half? What about hypothesis two? Okay, so I'm thinking, how can I test and build rather than build and test? And the thought occurs to me that maybe I can be the robot. Okay? I can walk alongside these Hungarian pickers. I can go up and down the rows of fruit and try and simulate what a robot would do. But I've got the great advantage that I'm not going to have navigational problems. I'm not going to get lost and drive into a raspberry bush or get confused and start going backwards. I'm not going to hit anyone. Okay? So I am the dream scenario of what our robot could do. And I walk up and down simulating what everyone else is trying to make. And the results are remarkable. I'm making the situation worse. Right? I am slowing these people down. I am making everything worse than if I hadn't been there. So now hypothesis two is out. Okay? Using the robots to move the fruit is not helping anyone. So what can we do? Well, we go back to the drawing board and we work on a new hypothesis, a new way of doing it. We haven't spent any money at this point. We've saved ourselves millions in failed development activity. Some of the companies we've seen who have been trying to do this are starting to go bankrupt. Investors are starting to pull out. None of these companies have any meaningful revenue at the moment. But have we been able to do it? You're going to have to wait and see. Thank you.